Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast for Disney Cruise Line history, trip reports, and general travel planning. Well, welcome to episode 16. We are going to turn our focus back on a trip report in this episode, and I'm really excited to bring this show to you. I had a chance to sit down with our friends, the Towlers, John in particular, and talk about his family's recent trip to the Baltic on the Disney Magic. And this is a trip that someday I'm hoping our family is going to be able to do as well, and I'm really excited to bring this to you. But before we jump into that, as we move into, almost the middle of summer already, I had a chance to head over to Oahu in June, right after school got out. My parents live over there, so that's kind of the main emphasis why we end up in Oahu and over in Hawaii quite a bit during the year. And this time we stayed 3 nights at Aulani. We're DVC members, bought into it a couple years ago. And one of the things that I really love about podcasting and just being part of this community is getting to meet some of the other podcasters out there and just other fans out there. And one of the individuals who I've had just a lot of fun going back and forth with on Twitter, and he's just a great guy to get to know and to follow, is Dave Tupper. And we had a chance to meet up while I was over there for an hour or so and just hang out in the Lello Room, which is one of the bars slash they've got food service there and everything. And in the evening, they have music. And Dave and I had a chance to meet up for the first time and just talk all things Disney, talk about Aulani, talk about Hawaii. And Dave has his own podcast, the Aloha Disney 808, which you can find on iTunes for sure and Stitcher, I believe. And he talks all about Disney, a lot of focus on Disneyland, and a lot of focus on the Hawaiian Islands. So just a fun show to listen to and just a great guy to meet up with. And so I really encourage you to go over and give his show a try over at the Aloha Disney 808. And you've got an episode where we sat down for about 30 minutes and talked. So if you're interested in Aulani, interested in Hawaii, definitely go out there and check that show out. Okay, with all that being said, let's jump into today's episode where we focus on the Disney Magic and the Towlers' trip up to the Baltic here this last May. Enjoy, everybody. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, and today I'm pretty excited because we get to bring back a good friend of the show, John Towler, who's going to talk to us, or we are going to discuss their family's latest trip, or his family's latest trip up to the Baltic on the Disney Magic. And I believe you guys just got back, just about a week ago now, huh, John?
Yep, exactly a week ago. That's right, Steve.
And welcome back to the show. You've been on a couple times now, and if anybody out there doesn't remember, we met John and his family when we went to Norway last year, and it's just amazing in Facebook how those memory pages come up, and that was my memory page probably, I guess, last week, and it goes by so fast, but what a great time that was when we met you guys up in Norway.
Yeah, we had a fantastic time. It'll live long in our memories.
Yeah, and I remember you talking about going to the Baltic, and holy cow, it's already been a year, and there you guys have gone and come back already. So I'm really excited to hear all about your trip today. So thanks again for coming on.
Absolute pleasure, Steve.
All right, so just start with the basics. Who all traveled with you this time?
So as people can hear, I'm English. We live in the UK. I have a wife called Caroline, and I have 2 boys who are currently aged 11 and 7.
Perfect. And you guys left out of Copenhagen this time for a 7-day trip on the Disney Magic. Let's talk about just getting to Copenhagen and how you guys did that. And we'll kind of start there and kind of go through the whole cruise.
Okay, so as you say, Steve, the cruise sailed out of Copenhagen, which is the capital of Denmark. We chose to fly out a day early, and we flew out from London Luton Airport. It's not a long flight. It's about 90 minutes all in, so it's pretty easy to get to Denmark from the UK. And Copenhagen Airport, good experience that we had there. It was very efficient. No lines at all at passport control, so nothing like what you can experience at some airports in the US. Very short wait to pick our bags up, so a good experience. And we booked a hotel in the city centre for that Saturday night. The cruise sailed on the Sunday. And we had done some research in advance about how we would get from the airport into the city centre to the hotel. And obviously you can take a taxi. That's easy, it's quick, but expensive. It's the expensive option. But there's also, we discovered a train which takes about 15 minutes to get into the city centre. It's 72 Danish kroner for the 4 of us. Kids go free, so 72 Danish kroner for the 2 adults, effectively. So that's $10 in American money. So 15 minutes in and $10 for the family seemed like a really, really simple option. So that's what we decided to do. When we came through, after having picked our bags up, we looked around for the signs. Really easy to find, lots of signs pointing you to the train. And we found our way down there very easily. Of course, we had to buy tickets, and it was an automated ticket machine thing. There weren't people in booths you could go and buy tickets from. You had to use a machine. So that was slightly tricky, but there were lots of staff available to help if you needed them, and it wasn't tricky enough that we did. We managed to figure it out by ourselves. The train was very clean, really nice train. Took us straight into Copenhagen Central Station, and from there it was a 5-minute walk down to the hotel. So first kind of hour's experience of Denmark, really good, very efficient, easy to travel around, and very, very successful, that part of the trip. So we got to the hotel, kind of chilled out for a bit, and it was late afternoon by that point. So we thought we'd take a walk, do a bit of an explore, and we walked over to the Nyhavn area, which I believe is pronounced Nyhavn, which is who would know?
Exactly.
Which is the old port area where a couple hundred years ago all the old wooden ships would have come in and used it as their loading and unloading area. It's quite a long walk, took us maybe 35, 40 minutes to get there up across the main shopping street across town. And we were a bit disappointed when we got there, actually. It wasn't very exciting, very touristy. A lot of people around. It was a nice sunny evening. A lot of people around, and it was just full of cafes, really. So a bit disappointing. And by that stage we were pretty tired. It was time for food. Kids were hungry, so we just found a restaurant and had a bite to eat. It was an Italian. Again, I can't say it was great, probably because it was a cafe restaurant right in the middle of a touristy area.
Right.
So it was average. It was quite expensive. So I suppose my advice would be, if you want to go to Copenhagen and find great food, it probably is best to do some research first. And we didn't do any. We just kind of grabbed the first place we saw. So that was the Saturday in Copenhagen, and that was our few hours that we had free pre-cruise.
Were you guys close to Tivoli Gardens by any chance, or is
it very close?
Okay,
yeah, very close.
Could you walk to that, or is that something that you would have to take transportation?
No. Tivoli. So we were 5 minutes one side of the Central Railway Station. Tivoli Gardens was 1 minute the other side.
Okay,
so it was a 5-6 minute walk from our hotel to Tivoli Gardens.
So I have one more question, not to go on a tangent with Tivoli Gardens, but is that do you pay to get into the gardens itself? Or I guess, is there an entrance fee to the gardens and then you go on the rides?
Yes.
Or is it you just go into the gardens and then you pay to go on the rides?
Neither as such. So we didn't go.
Right.
We'll kind of get back to that. We were thinking about going on the Sunday when we came back, when we got off the Magic. And we ended up not going for a couple of reasons, partly because the weather wasn't very good. But we were chatting to some other people who had been, and they said that it was it was good, it was really good fun, but an expensive experience because you pay to get in and then you pay to go on all the rides as well.
Ah, okay.
So it's pretty expensive because it isn't just an amusement park. So there are places to eat. It's a park, so there's it's attractive. There's garden areas you can walk around, as well as it being an amusement park with rides. So so you pay both ways.
Okay, yeah, just kind of curious about that. I hadn't really talked to anybody that'd been over there before to experience that. So, well, cool. Yeah, the tourist areas, unfortunately, sometimes you don't get the best food there, do you?
No, exactly. And Copenhagen has a restaurant, I think it's called Nomi, which for most of the last 10 years, Michelin 3-star restaurant, has won best restaurant in the world. So, for people who, I'm not a foodie guy particularly, but I happen to know that, you kind of go to Copenhagen with good expectations about the food, I guess.
Right. Okay, well, let's jump into the cruise itself, and I'm really excited to hear about the different destinations you guys got to go to. But let's start with getting to the ship. How was that, and getting on it? Okay,
so the Disney Magic was docked at a place called Ocean Quay. It's very close to the city centre. It's about a 15-minute drive. So we did decide just to jump in a taxi and get there. That cost us 180 Danish kroner, which is about $27 today, and that includes the tip. So getting out to the ship was very, very easy and relatively inexpensive. We booked an 11:30 to midday check-in slot. So I guess we got to the cruise terminal around 11:15, and it was busy. There were already a lot of people out there. So there were some lines to get to the check-in desk. Not too bad. It probably took us 15 minutes before we got to the check-in desk. Our experience at the check-in desk was very good, very efficient, very friendly, exactly as you would expect from Disney. But when we checked in, boarding hadn't started, even though there were some people we knew who had booked themselves an 11 to 11:30 slot. Boarding hadn't started, so there were a lot of people just standing around waiting for boarding to start. And the environment wasn't very good. There weren't many seats. It was hot in there. So that experience was not great at all. And I guess they got boarding going around 11:45, something like that. We were in group 10 to board. So it was probably a little bit after midday before we were called through. So we were outside our slot, only just outside our slot. But we hadn't been able to sit and relax at all. We literally had to stand in a big group of people the whole time we were in that check-in building. Having said that, we heard from some other guys who'd had slightly later check-in slots, like 12:30, 1 o'clock. And by the time they arrived at the terminal, the lines just to get to check-in were well outside the building. Even if you had silver and gold priority boarding, there were still really long lines. So I think actually Disney needs to work on its processes at Copenhagen. It's not very customer friendly, didn't seem very efficient, wasn't very comfortable. So not a great experience at the terminal in Copenhagen. And then we boarded on deck 1.
Oh, really?
So they didn't have high level boarding at all. So we didn't get to go through the atrium. So the way they did the when you go through the atrium, they do that announcement, "Welcome to the Towler family." They didn't do any of that. We just went on through deck 1 through that little door. I guess that doesn't really matter, but perhaps if you were on your first time cruise, that's not a very special experience. That's a kind of journeyman like experience rather than making you feel special and welcome from the first minute you get on board.
Right, especially if you're expecting it from some of us that kind of maybe do too much planning and research ahead of time. So, yeah, ours in Miami was the same thing, except for we boarded on the deck above the atrium level, which I think is deck 5. And yeah, it was kind of the same thing where they didn't announce the family, but they were all out there and they kind of greeted you and said, welcome aboard. But that was just about it.
Yeah, no, we didn't really have any of that. We were just kind of ushered on and scanned our key to the world passes and got in the lift and went on our way.
Off you went. Was your room ready already, or what did you guys do then?
No, it wasn't ready.
Okay.
It was ready at 1:30 as promised.
Okay. So I'm guessing a lot of people, or most people like myself, have never been up through the Baltic area. I'm guessing there's probably maybe little hesitation or wondering what the weather would be like up at this time of year. How was it up there? Or what kind of advice would you give people that might be traveling to the Baltic region?
Well, we were a little bit nervous as well. I suppose the first thing to say is it's Northern Europe in spring. So it's very, very unpredictable. And from the research we did, it could have been anywhere from the mid-70s Fahrenheit, which is the low 20s Celsius, right down to the mid-40s Fahrenheit, so 8 or 9 degrees Celsius. And the bad news for us was it was definitely at the cold end of the spectrum. There was at least one day where it was in the 40s, and it really never got above 60 the whole time we were there. We had some rain, mostly in St. Petersburg, where the guys who took full-day tours, a lot of people did full-day tours out to visit some of the palaces that were out of the city centre. Those guys definitely got pretty wet in the morning part of their excursions. And also we had some rain when we were in Helsinki. So the weather was kind of mixed. You definitely needed to take some layers of clothing. You were pretty smart if you had something waterproof. So my advice is it's unpredictable. You need to plan for all eventualities. But we did talk to some locals while we were there who said it was the coldest spring for 100 years. So that might have been an exaggeration. But there were definitely some days where it was cold.
Yeah.
It wasn't Minnesota in January, but it was pretty chilly.
Yeah, it sounds like Alaska, where you got to dress in layers, because you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, exactly. And it can be raining 1 minute and then the sun will peek out 5 minutes later, and then 10 minutes later it's raining again. So it's some days are a bit like that. It was very changeable.
Uh-huh.
So I'll just drop another observation in. You made the comment, a lot of people may not have visited the Baltic. Northern Europe feels a bit remote, a long way away for some Americans, in fact, for some Europeans, I guess, as well. I was interested about the mix of people that would be on the cruise. And normally you don't really get to find that out. But funnily enough, on the first night, our cruise director, when she came on stage in the theatre before the show, gave us a breakdown of some of the nationalities of people of guests who were on the ship. Very interesting. So for 2,400 guests on board the Disney Magic, 340 from the UK, but 1,600 were from the US. So 2 out of every 3 people on that cruise were Americans. The remainder being made up from, I think she said, about another 30 countries, all in all. So the point for US listeners who might be a bit nervous about that type of cruise, feeling far away, don't worry, you'll be among lots of Americans still.
That kind of surprises me, because I guess the one that we did out of Dover up to Norway, I felt like there was probably a lot more people from the UK on it, but maybe I was off on that. So that kind of surprises me that many people were from the US on your cruise.
Yeah, I guess going out to Copenhagen, we'd have quite a few Scandinavians. You might have a lot of Germans, quite a lot of French, but no, vast majority were Americans with English in second.
Well, I have noticed from just like an airline perspective that there are a lot of flights that they have been adding to Copenhagen and up into that region of the country. Matter of fact, we've got a company called Iceland Air that has started. They're expanding all over the U.S. and it's just, it's not huge, but you definitely see them in all the different cities, and they are definitely touting, coming through Reykjavik and up to Northern Europe. So, maybe more people are traveling up there than I thought.
I think it's partly a Disney thing as well, because there were lots of other cruise ships around that we were kind of following around from port to port, and you bump into those guys when you're on excursions, as you know. And my experience was there were a lot of European languages, Eastern European languages, that I heard from those tour parties that were on the other cruise ships, but absolutely not on Disney. So I just wonder whether it is a Disney thing. Disney still feels a very English language experience.
Yeah, you're probably right there. So let's talk about your stateroom. I remember you from our last show when we did the pre-show about before you guys traveled, that you were booking a room again on Deck 8, I believe. And what did you guys book?
Yep, absolutely right, Steve. We were on Deck 8 again. So we booked a deluxe family ocean stateroom with veranda, which is the same level that we had when we went to Norway with you guys. And our experience with the stateroom was great. It was spotlessly clean throughout. Everything worked. The shower was great, and for a lot of people that really matters. It's a good start to the day to have a strong, powerful, hot shower. So that was good. And I really like having a veranda. And even on this cruise, where it was most of the time, it was too cold really to sit outside for any length of time, I really like having a veranda. It just gives you somewhere private and peaceful to go and watch as you come in and out of a port. It's just a nice space where you can go and do your own thing for a bit.
Yeah, we definitely.
So I like having a veranda. Funnily enough, sorry, Steve. Go on.
No, go ahead.
The guys we sat with at dinner, we were chatting to them about veranda or not, and they didn't have a veranda, and their opinion was very much just to have that veranda costs $2,000 or $3,000 extra. I don't know whether that's right, but that was their opinion. And their view was that was not money well spent, actually. You could better spend that premium on something else. So horses for courses, I guess. But I like having a veranda, and I don't think you can go back. Probably once you've had a stateroom with a veranda, you'll probably always do that, I think.
I think you're right. We went from an inside cabin to a veranda to then an ocean view with just the porthole on the last one. And it was nice to have the porthole because at least when you wake up, you can kind of see where you are. I kind of like having that in the morning. But yeah, you would definitely miss being able to open the door, have the fresh air come in. And like you said, especially going into the different ports that you guys got to see today or see on this trip, it would have been nice to have that to go out on. So good on you guys. Yep. I agree with you. The next one we do, we're definitely getting a veranda as well. So, well, cool. So let's talk about just your experience on the ship before we get into the ports. And why don't we start with, I guess, just your experience with the food?
Okay, so we used cabanas every day for breakfast, apart from one, including the final morning, actually. So I suppose that's a little tip. As some people know, you're very much encouraged to have breakfast on the final morning of the cruise in the restaurant where you had your final dinner the night before, but you absolutely don't have to do that. Cabanas is open on that final morning, and we were there probably 7:15, 7:30, and it was quiet. There were hardly any people in there at all. So that was a nice, relaxing experience on that final morning, rather than having to have a slightly more formal sit-down breakfast.
It does feel more rushed, doesn't it? Like having to go to your final restaurant versus going to cabanas. We did cabanas last time too before we left on the final day, and that just felt like a more relaxing morning to us, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think because if you're on main seating for dinner, you've got to be at that breakfast for 7 a.m.
Yeah,
I think. And if you're in a hurry and you want to get off the ship, fine. But we weren't in a hurry at all that final morning.
Right.
So we didn't have any particular desire to be sat down at breakfast at 7 o'clock. So if you don't have to do that, why would you?
Right. And then did you guys eat at cabanas for lunch then, or what did you guys do for lunch usually?
So some and some. So you briefly mentioned what did we do when we got on the Magic on that first day after checking in. Well, cabanas is also open for lunch on that embarkation day if you happen to have a check-in slot that's early enough. So that's where we went actually. So we got on the Magic and we went straight up in the elevator to cabanas, and we just had some lunch and hung out in there till our cabin was ready at 1:30. And our experience of cabanas has always been good, actually. There's always tables available. We've never really experienced any lines to get to the food. Lots of choice, and it's a buffet. But my view is, for a buffet, it's pretty good. It's pretty good quality food, actually. So I like cabanas a lot. And the only day when we had breakfast in one of the table service restaurants was on the first sea day, because we booked a character breakfast, which was in Animator's Palette. There's no charge for that, no additional charge, but slots are limited. So my advice would be, as soon as you have access on the website to book activities, if that's something you're interested in, go and find that character breakfast option. And we did speak to people on the cruise who had wanted to do that, but had found that there weren't any slots available. So it sounds as if they do sell out pretty quickly. And for us, I think that turned out to be a good choice, actually. And also a good choice to do early on in the cruise, because seeing the characters kind of got you into that Disney mood. And we had Mickey, Minnie and Pluto, and the kids really loved it. So it was our first breakfast, and it was a really nice experience for them to have that a good start.
And then how about the main restaurants then? How was the service there, and what did you think of those?
Okay, so dining rotation. We were in Lumiere's again first, which was the same as when we were with you guys last year. And again, we shared a table. We were with an American family who had two boys of a similar age to ours. And that was nice for the kids. The kids got on really well. And you remember, Steve, our first night experience last year in Norway was bad, wasn't it?
Yes,
slow service, poor food. And after that first night, I was really worried that we weren't going to have a great time for dining. This year, much, much better. Low-key servers, really pleasant, and they kind of just got on with it. Good food, no big long waits between courses. So the first night was very good, and actually that was our experience all week. I think I had one entree, which I didn't like very much, and Caroline had one appetizer, which she wasn't very keen on. But apart from that, everything was great. Really good experience for dining. And I suppose we were slightly more knowledgeable this year. Last year, the kids very much stuck to the kids' menu, because we didn't really realise that the kids could have whatever they wanted off whatever menu. But this year, we did much more of a mix and match. between the kids menu. If they liked the look of something on the kids menu, they'd have that. But also they definitely did look at the main adult menu as well, and had some pasta dishes off that. And I think they had some salmon off that as well. So that giving them a bit wider choice worked out very well for us. So the kids' dining experience was much better than last year, I think. And the serving team were very good this year. They worked very hard to keep the kids entertained with, the usual stuff, napkin folding, riddles, math riddles, making them make shapes out of crayons and moving one crayon to make a different shape, all of that sort of stuff that they do to keep the kids entertained. So they did a really good job all week, those guys. It was a good experience.
Perfect. Did you guys have a favorite, just out of curiosity, between the three? Because I think we've become fans of karaoke's, to be honest, as far as the food goes.
I suppose I never like to do the negative thing.
No, that's
but
okay.
Actually, I like Lumiere's the least.
Uh-huh.
Between Animator's Palette and Carioca's, I like both of those. I think I like the experience of Animator's Palette. I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't been, but the things that happen around you during the course of the dinner, I think, are probably more interesting in Animator's Palette than they are in Carioca's.
Yeah.
And I like the food in both of those.
Yeah, the experience in Animator, like you said, not to ruin the experience. So. Yeah, I think we like Carioca's just because it's a little bit maybe more spicier food. They put a little more options that way, maybe. So, but they're all pretty good. But I tend to agree with you on Lumiere's. That's probably my least favorite of the three.
Yeah, it tends to be the least interesting. I think, like you say, you tend to get a bit more variety in the other two.
Yeah,
whereas Lumiere's is a bit kind of samey and standard, I think.
Uh-huh. Well, cool. So on this cruise, pretty port intensive. You guys got to stop at quite a few different ports. Did you have 2 sea days, I believe, again?
We did. So it was a sea day the first day after we set off from Copenhagen, and another sea day on the final day before we arrived back in Copenhagen.
And I really like that. I'm kind of I really like having that sea day on before you disembark, just because it kind of lets you kind of wind down a little bit, and you don't feel so rushed that last day.
Yeah, exactly.
So
the winding down thing is we're not very good at that as a family, as you probably know. Well, you do know. So we're the kind of family that gets involved in stuff that's happening.
Perfect. So this leads into, what did you guys do?
Yeah, we did a lot. Most listeners will know Disney puts on a vast array of activities on board the ship throughout the day. And I mean every day, not just sea days, other than there's not much on in the mornings and early afternoons while the ship's in port. And that makes sense because most people are off the ship. But the rest of the time, there's always stuff going on. So I won't go through everything, but on the sea days, we did things like we learned how to draw Mickey, we learned how to draw Stitch, we were taught how to make origami hearts, we made 3D Mickeys.
Yeah, what was that? Out of curiosity, what's a 3D Mickey?
So they give you a flat piece of paper,
just
a sheet of paper with a plan of a Mickey on.
Okay. And
you cut the pieces out, and you fold it along the dotted lines, and they give you some glue dots, and you stick it together, and you end up with a kind of stand-up cardboard Mickey.
Gotcha. Okay, I was curious about that one.
If you make it wrong, it doesn't stand up.
Well, if you draw like me, Mickey looks like a bear, so there you go.
Yes, exactly. So we did all those things. We took part in a quiz about the history of Disney Cruise Line. You'd have loved it, Steve. It would have been right up your street. You'd have been awesome at it. We were less awesome, but I think we scored 13 out of 25, which for us, that's really good. We're normally much worse than that.
Well, some of those other quizzes are pretty tough. So
they are tough. And then there are lots and lots of game shows that Disney puts on. We went to the Feud, which is obviously Disney's version of the Family Feud, or Family Fortunes as we call it in the UK. And predictably, James, who's our 7-year-old, he ended up on stage, as he always does. He stole all of the 100 points from the other team. There was rapturous applause. It was tremendous. So we loved that. That was great fun. And actually, he did really well because the category was name a type of sandwich, and the other guys got all of the answers except one. I think they were missing number 3. So quite a popular answer. And James knows nothing about sandwiches, obviously. So he was up at the front, and all the crowd was shouting out answers, and he was smart enough to go up to a lady who was sat quite close to him. And we were sat right at the back, so we had no idea what she was saying. But it turns out she was saying club sandwich.
Oh.
And club sandwich is an American thing. We don't have club sandwich in the UK. It doesn't.
Okay.
It's not a thing. It doesn't really exist.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, fortunately, he listened to this lady and he went club sandwich, and it was the right answer. That was tremendous. We loved that. So that was fun. We did Disney's version of Wheel of Fortune, which was also good fun. I think 3 out of the 4 of us ended up on stage doing a bit of that. And James and I also took part in How Well Do You Know Your Family?
That's a fun show.
Yeah, it was good. And I'd done it with Sam last year. I did it with James this year. And we failed to win yet again.
Oh, no.
Even though some of the questions they asked were the same as last year. And we'd rehearsed with James what he needed to say if those questions came up. And we still didn't win.
Well, it sounds like you need to go on another cruise.
Well, exactly. I think we probably do. And we even took part in something which I hadn't seen before. I don't know whether Disney did it last year, but if they did, we missed it last year, called the Disney 200 event, which is where they give you some vegetables, like a potato and a carrot, and you have to make a race car. Yeah, really, you have to do that. So we were terrible, as usual. Our car was really slow, and I think we got knocked out in the very first round. But we had a lot of fun doing that. It was really good fun. We had a lot of laughs. And then on the final night, James took part in the Disney's Got Talent competition again, playing piano. We did a lot of stuff. We were very busy, and we had a huge amount of laughs. And I just wanted to make an observation. Actually, I was listening a couple of days ago to the episode you did with Christy. I think it was episode 13. Where you were talking about entertainment, and you were comparing and contrasting Disney and Carnival. And Christy said that she didn't think there was much entertainment in the evenings for families other than going to the main show in the theatre or taking in a movie, and that everything was kind of aimed at very young kids. I'd have to totally disagree with that. So just some examples. In between dinner, where we would finish dinner probably 7:30 most nights, and the main theatre show starting at 8:45. We did How Well Do You Know Your Family? We did Disney's Got Talent. There was something called Thuggo Night, where the thugs take over O'Gill's pub, and the entertainment team kind of just mess about and entertain the kids for half an hour. There was the Frozen Deck Party one night. And I guess other than the last one, Frozen Deck Party probably is aimed at little kids predominantly. All those other things, definitely not aimed at little kids. In fact, plenty of teenagers involved. So I think that there is a lot going on for families in the evening, on particularly the Disney cruise we went on. So I disagree with Christie's observation on that. So I guess I know every family is different, and you choose to get involved in what you want to get involved in. But from our experience, getting involved in the entertainment is something we like to do, and the entertainment team were really tremendous on the Disney Magic. My advice is it's very worth getting involved. You can have a whole heap of fun.
You know, we finally did that on our last cruise, and you're right. The entertainment teams and the people that work in it are just phenomenal, reaching out and having fun with you while even if you're not the ones on stage, they have a good time with, if you just want to go and watch the shows. It really, it was something I guess we missed out on our first 2 cruises, and it'll definitely be something that we take part in. We may not be as successful as your family, but
no, we're not successful at all. We participate, but we're not successful. We just have fun.
Well, I know you do have one medal somewhere hidden in your office, I think. But
I do.
All right. Well, cool. It sounds like just a great time in the evenings of the ship. What about the actual shows? Did you get to see any of them at all? We
did. In fact, we went to all of the evening shows. And I had mixed views this time on our experience overall. So I'll just to go through them briefly. The first night was Walt Disney: The Dream Goes On, and I think that show's looking pretty tired now, dated. As a show, it talks most of the time. It's talking about Disney history pre-1980, and I think it's an urgent need of updating that show. I think particularly for kids, the bulk of what you're told about in that show probably just doesn't feel relevant. You probably don't know the songs. Although having said that, our boys did enjoy it. They said they enjoyed it. So I guess what Disney's offering still does work. But I think if I was to pick one show that Disney needs to look at, I think it would be the Disney Dream Goes On, actually, now. Night 2 was Twice Charmed, which is a twist on the Cinderella story. It's a proper Broadway style show, so big song and dance routines. It's not amazing, but it's pretty entertaining. Night 3 was something different. We had a magic show by a guy called Kyle Knight and his wife Misty. And I suppose magic shows just depends on whether you like magic or not. For Caroline, it's not really her thing, so she wasn't blown away. I'm probably more easily impressed, I guess. I thought they were pretty amazing, actually. They did do some standard big illusions, but they also did some incredible close-up stuff. So they had a camera zoomed in on, Kyle had a camera zoomed in on his hand, so you could see exactly what was going on. And I thought he did some pretty amazing stuff. And apparently they're reasonably famous. They're from Vegas. They've been on some TV shows in the States with Penn and Teller. So I think they're a pretty high quality magic act. And they did a daytime show as well on the following day for the kids, which we managed to get to. Even in that slightly smaller environment, they were really good. They were very funny. They got the kids involved and taught them a couple of tricks. And our kids really loved that. Actually, they had a really good time. So I like that. I like the magic thing. Actually, that was good.
That's a good point. That the when you're on the cruise, a lot of times those big acts that they do shows in the smaller stages. Sometimes just for adults and sometimes for families. And we went and saw a ventriloquist, which my wife doesn't like ventriloquists, but we went and saw him do his show down in Fathoms, mostly for the families, and it was hilarious. So yeah, there's a couple different opportunities to catch those shows if you don't make it to the big show in the evening.
Yeah, exactly. And I think actually the magic guys did an adults only show late one night as well, which we didn't manage to make it to. So so they put an effort in, I think, to do plenty of stuff while they're on board. So that was good. So the next night there wasn't a live show because we were in St. Petersburg and lots of people were still ashore doing evening events, which we can talk about later. But the next night it was Tangled, which is another full cast Broadway style show. And for me, that's probably the strongest show that Disney do at the moment. The action's non-stop, good songs, funny jokes. So we had a really good time at Tangled, very good fun. And then the penultimate night we thought was rather strange, actually. Disney Cruise Line appeared to have linked up with something called Disney on Broadway, which I guess is the shows that Disney put on Broadway, to bring some of the stars of those shows onto the ships to perform a concert set. So we had a gentleman called Robert Creighton, who I hadn't heard of, and he talked us through what he'd done on Broadway. And I guess I would describe him probably as a character performer rather than a leading man. So, he's kind of medium famous, I suppose, rather than super famous. And the theatre wasn't very full at all for that night. And I think Disney made a big mistake because they hadn't really explained in advance what the show was going to be about, who Robert Creighton was, and so on. I think people didn't turn up because they didn't know what they were going to expect. So if you're listening, Disney, to this, I think you really need to learn from that. I think you did make a mistake with that. So what Mr. Creighton did do, he kind of chatted us through his life story. He sang some songs from a few of the shows he's been in, and in fact a show that he created himself as well. Caroline liked it more than I did, and probably more than the kids did. And I suppose when you're seeing a kind of concert from a theatre guy, it really just depends on whether you love the particular songs he chose to sing, and I didn't particularly. So talented guy, good singer, pretty decent storyteller, but I didn't love it. And I think Disney needed to sell it much, much better than they actually did. And then the final night was Disney Dreams, an Enchanted classic, which I don't know whether it's the last night show on every cruise, but certainly on the two we've been on, it has been. It's another full cast show, and it's a mashup of songs from various Disney films. I think Disney have tried quite hard with this one, so they have tried to keep it fresh. So there are 3 songs from Frozen. So for me, it's a pretty fitting end to the cruise. It's good. It's a good fun show. So overall, big theatre shows, mixed reviews from our family, and I think if Disney really wants to sell themselves as go on a Disney cruise ship and the theatre shows you'll see are as good as anything you'd see on Broadway. I don't think they're quite there at the moment. I think they've got a bit of work to do.
Yeah, I really like the Disney Dreams. That's kind of a fun show to end it, just with all the different songs and whatnot. Did you guys see any of the movies by any chance? Have you guys ever done that?
No, in fact, the Buena Vista Theatre is probably about the only place on the Disney Magic that I've never set foot. Mm-hmm. Never been in it, never seen a movie there. Not our thing to go and watch something on the Funnel Vision. So no, still haven't done that. But they had the big show this time was the Pirates of the Caribbean, which had premiered the week before, so it was only kind of 4 or 5 days old. And in fact, in the night we were in St. Petersburg, where there wasn't a show on in the theatre. It was Pirates of the Caribbean. That's the movie that they put on in the main theatre that night. But it played plenty of times during the week in the Buena Vista Theatre as well. But actually, we didn't go and see it, partly because we were busy doing other things, and partly because it's a 13 rating.
Right.
And James is only 7, so I'm sure it would have been fine, but we chose not to do it anyway.
Right, no, I totally understand. We've only been to one movie on this last cruise. We went and saw Doctor Strange, but
okay,
yeah, that was a good movie. But yeah, I kind of feel, how do I say this the right way? Like when you going to Norway or going to the Baltic, like I want to go do those kind of things. I can go watch a movie at home, whereas this is a whole sidetrack. Going down to the Caribbean is kind of more like a beach vacation, so. We did it on a sea day when it was really busy at the pool, and it was kind of a nice, couple hours to get out of the sun for a little bit. So I could see.
I think if I'm honest, let's say you need a couple of hours to go and see a movie.
Yeah.
We never had a couple of hours the whole cruise where we didn't have anything to do.
Yeah, you guys, I know, because you guys are always really busy. So yeah. But that's a statement to why we love Disney Cruise Line too, because there's just so much stuff to do and be involved in.
Exactly.
How about the kids clubs? Did the kids experience or go and spend any time in them this time?
They did, actually. So for anybody who listened to the episode we did about Norway, I think I said our kids didn't use the kids club very much at all, and didn't really want to. This year they were much keener to go, actually. So Sam could have gone to Edge this time. He was old enough, but he decided he'd rather stay with his brother. And hang out in the Oceaneers Club / lab. I think they were in the lab pretty much the whole time, because I think the younger kids tend to hang out in the club. The slightly older kids tend to hang out in the lab. So they were keen to go. They spent most of the time when they were in Kids Club, from what I understand, doing technology stuff, playing on iPads, doing Mario Kart, rather than getting involved in the organised things that were going on, sloppy science, all of that sort of stuff. But they seemed to thoroughly enjoy themselves. They probably spent maybe 10 hours in there during the week in total. And I think they had a good time. So, yeah, they were pretty keen to go to Kids Club this time.
How about did you ride the Aquadunk by any chance? Was it in your 40-degree weather?
No, we did not. There were people using the pools. I found it hilarious because you've got people in there, in their swimming stuff, being supervised by a Disney lifeguard crew in full cold weather gear, woolly hats, and it's just odd. It's just strange. It's just a strange thing. So we had no interaction with the pools whatsoever.
Yeah, it sounds like our trip to Alaska, where I think the kids were in the pool a couple days, but I remember one day standing outside, and actually I think we went to a lecture with I went to a lecture with my parents, and I came up, and Anawake and the kids had gone to the pool, and she was all bundled up drinking some hot spiced wine, and the kids were splashing around in the pool as it was raining, and I think there's maybe 3 kids in the pool along with ours, so
yeah,
kind of the same experience maybe. Well, it sounds like you guys had a great time just hanging around the ship on your 2 sea days and embarkation day. Let's talk about the ports now, because this is what I'm really excited to hear about, too, some of the different places that you guys got to experience. And you guys stopped in Tallinn first, which is the capital of Estonia. Let's talk about that, I guess, and we'll start right there. Okay,
so yeah, Tallinn was our first stop, and we arrived around 10:45 a.m., so mid-morning. And just a little aside, something we didn't know, we booked an official Disney excursion, but even if you hadn't booked a Disney excursion, there was still a free shuttle bus to and from the old town. So that's worth knowing if you're thinking about, I'm going to get off the ship, how am I going to get into town? Do I have to walk? Do I need to get a taxi? Disney put on a free shuttle bus. So that was very helpful for those guys who hadn't booked an official Disney tour. So we had booked one. It was called Tallinn Highlights. For anybody who wants to look it up, it's TA11 is the reference. It's a 4 to 4.5 hour tour, part bus, part walking tour. We had a pretty good guide, very informative, and as a general comment, actually, our guides that we had in all of the ports we visited were really good, very high quality. We were very impressed with all of them. The bus driver was not so good. He was somewhat erratic. He was called Sergei. I think he may have been a throwback to the Soviet times, and we very nearly crashed into a tram at one point.
Oh, no.
So it was a bit of a roller coaster ride, the whole bus part.
Sounds like some of our crew drivers when we go to the hotels on our layovers, but
yeah. Okay. So yes, some people were scrambling to try and work out whether there were seatbelts on the bus at that point. Anyway, we all survived and it was fine. So probably the best story we were told by our guide was that during the Soviet time, the Russians had a plan to build a new 6-lane highway right through the middle of the old town, which would have destroyed 70% of it. But fortunately, they ran out of money and it never happened. So these days, the old town of Tallinn is protected as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's old. It's got 13th, 14th century buildings still in that old town. So very fortunate that the Russians didn't get to destroy all of that. It was a pretty good tour. It took in all of the main sites, which we enjoyed, but definitely the most interesting part was the old town. And we only ended up spending maybe 40 minutes there, of which less than 15 minutes was free time just to wander around. And we could have probably done with about another half an hour just to look around on our own and explore a little bit. So we enjoyed ourselves very much, but I think Disney do need to look at the balance of that one. It just felt a bit imbalanced. Too much time on a bus looking at less interesting parts of the town, not enough time walking around the old town.
And from there, you guys went to Russia, St. Petersburg, and this is a place I'm really looking forward to travel. And I do have a question for you at the end after we get done talking about St. Petersburg.
Okay, so St. Petersburg is the second city of Russia, and they call it the cultural capital of the country. Most people got off the ship early for all-day tours, whereas we weren't getting off till 1 p.m. So it's very strange on the boat, actually, because by 9 a.m. it felt like a ghost ship. There were very few people still on board. So customs and immigration, which we'd heard bad stories about, for us it didn't take very long at all, maybe 15 minutes to get our whole group through. But we did hear that for those who got off very early, and I think we heard probably almost 2,000 people got off the Magic between 8:30 and 9:30.
Wow!
So a lot of people getting off. So we understood it did take a while for those guys to get through, but for us it was a very easy experience, and the customs guys were reasonably friendly. The tour we took was called the Majestic Spilled Blood Cathedral and Boat Ride Tour, which is tour SP05, and as the name suggests, it was a 1-hour canal boat ride, followed by a visit to the Cathedral of Spilled Blood, so called as it was built on the site where Tsar Alexander II was assassinated in 1881. We talked about the weather. It wasn't great weather that day. It was pretty cold. It was a bit rainy. But the canal boat ride was fun, actually. You could sit inside or you could wander up onto the deck. You had to be a bit careful because you went under some very low bridges, actually.
Really?
And you had to be pretty careful. If you walked up the steps onto the deck, you absolutely had to check that you weren't going to lose your head before you carried on. So that was interesting. But it was good. Our guide gave us good commentary throughout. And she had some technology, actually. We had headpieces on, so we were hearing it directly in our ears, what she was saying. We didn't have to be within physical earshot of her. So the tech was quite good, actually. And it passed by most of the main historic sites of St. Petersburg, so the Hermitage Museum, the Peter and Paul Fortress. So enjoyed the canal boat ride. It was good fun.
So that sounds like a good way to see, get a good view of the whole city, kind of like a hop-on, hop-off bus, sort of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So there were some good photo opportunities. You could get some good photos. Then we were really worried about the next part, actually, which was the Spilled Blood Cathedral tour, because we'd heard that the cathedral was closed on a Wednesday, which was the day we were there. And indeed it was.
Oh, no.
But not to Disney.
Oh.
Who'd arranged special access.
Little Disney magic, huh?
Exactly. So it turned out to be doubly awesome because the cathedral was beautiful on the inside. There was over 70,000 square feet of mosaics inside the cathedral. And somebody had said that or I'd read in advance that was the case. And I didn't believe it. I was, how could there be 70,000 square feet of mosaics inside the cathedral? But the whole of the inside was just completely covered with these beautiful mosaics of, religious scenes and all of that sort of stuff. So it was beautiful. But also we got to see it without the huge crowds who our guide told us are there every other day. So it was just Disney tour parties in there, and there were probably 3 groups in there. So not busy at all. It was incredible. And she told us a very interesting tale of how the cathedral took 23 years to build initially, but that when the communists were still in charge, they'd let it become derelict as they were a secular society, and it was used as a warehouse. It was full of pigeons, and that they only started to restore it in the 1970s, and it took 27 years to complete the restoration, so 4 years longer than it took to build it in the first place.
Wow.
Which I thought was a very interesting story. So that was good. We loved that, absolutely loved it, and we got some tremendous photos, which I think you've seen some of on Facebook.
Yeah, and I'm going to try and find some photos just online and put them in the show notes, because that is just an amazing-looking cathedral. It's very beautiful, very picturesque.
It is. And then actually we got a bonus at the end of that excursion, which was a shopping trip. So we got taken to a touristy shop, which sold a huge variety of Russian gifts. The Matryoshka dolls, so the little dolls inside other dolls. They sold Fabergé-style eggs. They sold amber jewellery. But it wasn't cheap and tacky. So the price points of the products they were selling were from a few dollars right up to a couple of $1,000s. So they had a big range of stuff that you could buy, actually. And we managed to buy some nice gifts for friends, a couple of items for us. And I think we spent less than a couple of $100s in total. So you could buy some nice stuff at pretty reasonable value, actually. And that was a bonus. We didn't know we were going to get to do that. And we had maybe 40 minutes in that store. And that was good. Well, that was a bonus that we weren't expecting. So we didn't take an evening tour because we didn't leave St. Petersburg till late in the evening. But just as we arrived back at the ship at the end of our tour, there were lots and lots of people heading off the ship, all looking very smart in their fancy clothes, heading off to the ballet or the opera or some other private dining experience. And lots of people told us the next day that for people who've been on the evening trips out, that they'd had an absolutely amazing time, really, really amazing. So I think most people who went to St. Petersburg loved it.
And if I remember correctly, this is the second time you've been to St. Petersburg?
It is, yes. I went... Go on, ask your question.
No, I was just curious. And, I mean, to me, St. Petersburg has always been one of those places, like, I'm going to throw... I mean, just for me, St. Petersburg and Hong Kong are just one of those, like, kind of magical places that I've always wanted to see. Does it kind of live up to the hype, I guess, or in your mind, since you've been there twice, or... Hype's not the right word, but... Yeah,
okay. So, the first time I went, I guess it was probably very different to how it is today, because I went in 1985 when it was under communist rule, when it was still called Leningrad. And I remember it very well. We went to the ballet in 1985. We saw the Kirov Ballet du Giselle. So those cultural things were absolutely still happening back then. We went to the Hermitage Museum. We spent a day there. So I think it probably was fascinating 30 years ago, partly for some slightly different reasons, such as being followed around by the KGB the whole time you were there. But and even though we didn't go out to the palaces, I thought it was really interesting. It was very beautiful. And I suppose my conclusion would be I would love to go back. It's the sort of place that, maybe in 10 years' time, Caroline and I might go back to for a long weekend, might go back to for 3 or 4 days just to go and explore it a bit more fully. So yeah, I love St. Petersburg. I thought it was really interesting.
And the other question I wanted to throw out, so we are going on a Baltic cruise in September with Norwegian, and just looking at some of the other different cruise lines, they tend to stay in St. Petersburg 2 nights, where Disney has a longer cruise where I believe they stay 2 nights, but generally the 7-day cruise they only spend 1 night so that they can get all the different cities in. Do you think 1 night or that 1 day is enough, or would you rather stay 2? Just out of curiosity.
It would depend on what I would lose,
Right.
I guess. If we stayed 2 there on a 7-day cruise, you'd have to lose something.
Right.
And I wouldn't want to lose something. So for me, on a 7-day cruise, I think I'd rather have the opportunity to visit more ports. But if you said to me, you can have everything in the world and you can have 2 days in St. Petersburg as well, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So we did a pretty limited thing. We did a canal boat ride and we went to the cathedral. We didn't do any of the palaces. We didn't go to the Hermitage Museum. We didn't do an evening event. So, yeah, 2 days in St. Petersburg would have been great.
I was just kind of curious, but the 1 day definitely you got to see some pretty good highlights, and like you said, it kind of comes with a cost if you stay 2 days there.
Yeah.
Well, cool. So from St. Petersburg, where did you guys go next?
So we sailed out of St. Petersburg around midnight, I guess, when people had got back from their evening excursions. So we didn't arrive to our next port, which was Helsinki, which is the capital of Finland, until around midday the following day. And we arrived in the middle of a massive hailstorm.
Oh, no.
So being me, I'm a bit crazy. I did go up on deck because I wanted to see us sail in. And there were probably 10 of us in total on the deck watching us come in. And I was stood under the glass area by where the table tennis tables are, with the hail coming down all around me. So that was interesting experience. And it didn't hail; it was just a hailstorm, and it passed across. And that was the last we saw of it. So that was good. And we'd booked a tour. We'd booked tour HE13, which was called Helsinki and Old Town Porvoo. So we got off the Magic, climbed aboard a bus, and we set off for Helsinki city centre. And we stopped at the Senate Square, which has got some, big parliament-y type buildings all around. So a photo stop, effectively, for 10 minutes. And then we drove out, probably a 40-minute drive out of Helsinki to a place called Porvoo, where our first stop was at a farm, which we'd been told was a visit to a distillery.
I remember you were
I was kind of excited. Yeah, I absolutely was. I was expecting to sample some Finnish vodka, but sadly there was no sign of any alcohol at all.
Oh, no.
However, we did get to have a slice of the best caramel cake I think I have ever tasted. So effectively, it turned into a coffee and cake stop at a kind of traditional Finnish farm. So it wasn't quite what I was expecting, but the caramel cake was really, really good.
Made up for it.
Then we went off to the old town of Porvoo itself, which was only a 10-minute drive from the farm. And it was a bit disappointing, actually. I'm not quite sure what I was expecting. I was expecting something older with more to see, I suppose. And it turned out just to be a few local craft and antique shops selling nothing particularly interesting, plus the usual assortment of cafes that you get in touristy type places. Other than that, there were a couple of old buildings, couple of 100 years old buildings, which were used as warehouses. And it was like, okay, fine. It's just, it's a couple of 100-year-old wooden building. There's nothing particularly exciting about it. So we were there for around 40 minutes. And, we'd seen it. We'd seen everything we wanted to see within 20 minutes, probably. So we then jumped back on the bus, headed back to Helsinki, where we stopped at the amazing Rock Church, which was designed by two brothers back in the 1960s. And it was a commission by the Finnish government to build a new church in Helsinki. And a piece of land was offered, and most people put in designs where they would build a church on top of the piece of land, as you would expect. Mm-hmm. These two brothers said, no, we don't want to do that. We're going to blast into the rock. So we're going to blast a big hole underneath some of the rock, and we're going to build the church inside the rock. And it's amazing. It is fantastic. It has an incredible copper ceiling, and it's very, very beautiful. So we loved our trip to the Rock Church. Really, really good. And it's right in the middle of Helsinki, slap bang in the middle. So I suppose we were in Helsinki about 5 hours altogether on that tour. We had an interesting time. It wasn't amazing. And we got back on board not long before we sailed off towards Sweden, actually. So we were off the ship pretty much the whole time it was in Helsinki.
Did you guys walk around the central part of Helsinki, or is there an old part, or when you came back, or was the ship close to that at all, or?
The traffic wasn't great in Helsinki, and we were told that was partly because the Finnish royal family were hosting a visit from some of the other royal families in Scandinavia. So there were quite a lot of roads blocked off because the royal families were driving around, I guess. Oh. So the traffic wasn't great in Helsinki. There were a few traffic jams. So we didn't get free time to walk around very much. So the Senate Square was the only time where we could have wandered off, I guess. We only had about 15 minutes in the Senate Square. Having said that, one of the buildings that's around the edge of the Senate Square is the oldest building in Helsinki. And I forget when it dates back to. I'm going to say late 1700s. So Helsinki doesn't have an old town as such. It doesn't have lots of old buildings, I suppose, because the vast majority of them burnt down over the years, as tends to happen in big capital cities.
Right. From there, you guys go to your final port, and I'm pretty excited about this because I want to hear about one of the museums you stopped at, and that is Stockholm, another city which I've never been to. But I think you've been there before, so you kind of had a heads up on how to get around. Yeah, we have. Caroline and I have been there before, and we loved our first visit there. So just before we get into Stockholm itself, just a little tip: the last 2 hours of sailing prior to actually arriving in the centre of Stockholm, you sail through some very narrow channels past hundreds of tiny Swedish islands, some of which are uninhabited, but many of which have summer houses on them. And it really is one of the most spectacular sights you will ever see. Back in the 1990s, I took a ferry, just a normal ferry from Stockholm to Helsinki and back. And I've talked about it many times over the years, how beautiful that 2 hours leaving Stockholm and the 2 hours back is. So I was really looking forward to doing that again. So I'd absolutely recommend to everyone, get up a bit early if required. So it's the 2 hours before you arrive that's the most scenic, and get up on the deck so you can take it all in. Or even if it's at a time when Cabanas is open, grab a window seat if you can. So most of the time that's what we did actually. It was breakfast time. We headed up to Cabanas. We found a table right by the window and we just sat and watched the scenery. And it's beautiful. Probably, if you were to ask me, the two most spectacular things I've ever seen in my travels would be the Grand Canyon and that 2 hours sailing into Stockholm. They're really? Probably my top. Yeah, they're probably genuinely my top two of anything I've ever done, actually. So clearly, you, when you leave Stockholm, you follow the same route back out. So the first 2 hours leaving Stockholm affords you the same opportunity, if you want, to take in that site. But I think on lots of cruises, clearly you leave around dinner time, so you might well be having main seating dinner at the same time. So my advice would be it's much better to see it on the way into Stockholm rather than risk being available on the way out. Good advice.
So that was probably my highlight of the whole trip, actually. That 2 hours just sailing into Stockholm, it is just beautiful. I know I'm kind of going on, but I can't oversell how fantastic that is. So we arrived a little bit late in Stockholm, actually. Don't know why, but we did arrive a bit late. We didn't get to disembark until just after 9:30 a.m. and I think we were due to be able to get off about 9 o'clock. And as Caroline and I had been there before, we hadn't booked a Disney excursion for Stockholm. We made our own way around. However, there was a free shuttle bus again. Disney put on a free shuttle bus into the city centre of Stockholm. It was around a 15-minute drive, so we did take the opportunity of jumping on that. And then we got on, there's a hop-on, hop-off ferry, which kind of makes its way around the main sites of Stockholm because they're on various different islands. So we jumped on the hop-on, hop-off ferry, and our first stop was the Vasa Museum, which I think is the one perhaps you're interested in hearing, unless it's the ABBA Museum.
The Vasa Museum, definitely. Because This ship is amazing, and I encourage you. I'll try and put a link in it in the show notes as well, because we talked about it in your pre-show about going, and I had never heard of it before, and I went on and just looked at the website, and it's an amazing ship. Yeah, it really is. So it is the most visited museum in Scandinavia, and it houses a Swedish 64-gun warship called the Vasa, and it sank 1,400 yards into her maiden voyage in 1628. So she sank to the bottom of Stockholm harbour, she sank into the mud,
and she then lay in the mud on the bottom of Stockholm Harbour for 333 years before being salvaged in 1961. And what was amazing was, because she'd been on the bottom of a very cold piece of water that's not very salty, that has not very much oxygen getting to it, when they found the ship, even after 333 years, the wooden hull of the ship was still largely intact. So an amazing find, really. So today she's fully restored, and she remains the world's only preserved 17th century ship. And she's amazing. I have been to the museum before, but even when I entered this time, the sight of the ship still takes your breath away. It genuinely made me feel very emotional, just looking at this ship. And for our 11-year-old Sam, this museum was probably the highlight of his whole vacation, actually. He just adored it. He thought it was incredible. So the Vasa truly is spectacular. And even for people who've been there before, we probably went, Caroline and myself, 15 years ago, maybe a bit less, 13, 14 years ago. They've definitely added more information. There's a huge amount of side exhibits to go and look at. And we were chatting while we were there to one of the researchers, and she told us that they've still got many thousands of internal pieces of wood, so not the hull, but internal structure, which they're trying to put back together. And they're currently working on reconstructing one of the main internal cabins, which they hope to have on display in, well, she said they've still got lots and lots and lots of work to do. So maybe another few years' time before they have that on display. She said a typical researcher manages to inspect and classify around 6 pieces of wood per day. So a huge amount of work that they still have to do. So I'm very keen that we will, as a family, get the opportunity one day to go back in a few years' time to see if have got that finished. So just, I suppose, a little piece of advice. It is a busy museum. It's very popular. We were probably there at 10 o'clock, and there was already a bit of a line to get in. But when we left it at lunchtime, there was a big line right out of the building. So if you can get there early, mid to late morning, I would absolutely advise people to get there early if they can. So that was the Vasa Museum, and then we took a 10-minute walk, something like that, over to the ABBA Museum, where we had lunch. Just to go off on a slight tangent, a general point on food and drink in Scandinavia for anybody who isn't familiar, it's really expensive, food and drink in Scandinavia. So in this cafe where we had lunch, just as an example, I had a shrimp sandwich, and it was lovely. It was a really nice shrimp sandwich. But just that one shrimp sandwich cost well in excess of $20, and that is typical for Scandinavia. It is an expensive place to go and eat and drink. So we wanted to visit the ABBA Museum, as our kids like their music very much. For anybody who doesn't know, they were a Swedish pop band, one of the biggest selling bands of all time in Europe, and of course the inspiration behind the show Mamma Mia. And we enjoyed our time there. We thought the museum was pretty well presented. There was some interactive stuff for the kids to do, some quizzes. You could sing a bit of karaoke, as well as all the usual memorabilia that you tend to get in those type of museums, costumes and instruments and that sort of stuff. So the kids were looking forward to it. I think they came away satisfied with their trip to the museum. The ABBA Museum didn't blow them away, but I think they were satisfied with what they saw. And that was pretty much all the time we had in Stockholm. 2 museums, bit of a trip around, and then it was time to reboard the ship.
Did they talk about at all at the museum about, because I think ABBA's going on tour this summer, I think for the first time in, forever, to steal a Disney.
I don't. You may be right, but I don't think they are.
Am I out to lunch on that? I thought I read something about they were talking about getting back together again, but maybe.
I don't think so.
No, okay. Maybe that's speculation. Maybe I'm thinking about some other band. But
yeah, I would be. Yeah, I know is the short answer. I think it would have been headline news in the UK. So yeah. No,
you weren't able to pick up one of Benny shirts, were you, at the gift shop?
No, they were selling some pretty way out there 70s shirts, but and some flared trousers and all that sort of stuff. But no, I think we'd already spent so much money on lunch that we chose not to spend any more in the shop.
Yeah, luckily that lunch cost so much that you couldn't.
Exactly.
Oh man. Okay, so Stockholm was your final stop. You guys had the final day at sea, which we talked about, and then you were back to Copenhagen. And did you guys do anything once you guys got back to Copenhagen, or did you just head back home to England?
No, as it turned out, our flight back to the UK wasn't until the Sunday evening, so we had the whole of the day in Copenhagen. So we'd sort of been thinking about what we would do, and in the end, we did decide to book an official Disney tour for Disembarkation Day. So some people may not know that's something that Disney also offer. I don't know whether they do it on every cruise, but they certainly did it on this one. So we disembarked the Magic at about 8:15 in the morning, and we took a tour. So our tour was called Royal Copenhagen, and it was tour number CP50A. And it was a 4.5 hour, mostly bus tour, various stops along the way for photo opportunities, a one stop inside, a one inside palace tour. Really great guide, very funny actually. He regaled us with lots of tales of all things Danish as we went round. And our first stop was at the world-famous Little Mermaid statue, which is not disappointing, as long as you know in advance that it's only just over 1 metre tall.
Really?
And if you're expecting to see something the size of the Statue of Liberty, you may well be disappointed. It isn't that.
I thought it was a lot bigger.
No, I think it's 1.25 m, something like that. So whatever that is, 4 foot tall. So it's not huge, but it's very pretty, and it guards the entrance to Copenhagen harbour. And it's kind of iconic, I guess. So that was the first stop. From there, we went on to the Amalienborg Palace, which is where the Danish royal family reside. And you do get to have a photo with the palace guards. They are willing to say hello, unlike those at Buckingham Palace. And they were pretty friendly, unless you get too close. And at one point, I did get a bit close, and the guard did say, no closer than 3 metres. But definitely better than Buckingham Palace, where they just stare miserably at you and somewhat aggressive. From there, we drove around on the bus to see many of the main sites of Copenhagen, including Nyhavn, which we mentioned earlier, so the port thing. We drove past the Tivoli Gardens amusement park, which we talked about. We went past the town hall, and we headed over to the Christianborg Palace, which is the big formal palace where the Danish Queen holds royal receptions, where the Prime Minister has his office. And we had a 40-minute inside tour, and it was just as lavish as you would expect from an old European palace. Well worth taking the opportunity to see. Good. It was really good inside tour. And after that, we passed by a few more sites, such as the Opera House and the hippie commune of Christiania. Yes, there really is a big hippie commune still in Copenhagen, which lots of people walk around, apparently. I think I understand it's a bit smelly, but anyway, so we just stayed on the bus and drove around. And then we headed off to the airport where we were dropped off. So actually a really good tour, and a very nice way to end our vacation.
What did they do with your luggage, I guess, with the tour? So did that come with you on the bus, or did they send it to the airport? Mm-hmm. So it was the same routine as if you weren't taking a tour. So you packed your suitcases the night before, other than your carry-on, and left them outside your stateroom up until whatever time it was, 10:30, something like that. And those suitcases disappeared. But they had a priority luggage tag on. And when you went off into where you go, where everybody goes and collects the suitcases, the priority luggage was set to one side. So we went and picked up our suitcases, and we took them on the bus on the tour with us, and took them out, and they took them out to the airport. So actually, if you want a way to get to the airport, actually taking a Disney tour is quite a good way to get to the airport as well. I was just thinking about the same thing. I mean, if you're going to spend the money to go to the airport with the transfer, you might as well take the tour if you get the time afterwards. And like you said, what a good way to put kind of a cap on a great vacation.
Yeah, precisely. And we still only had about 7 hours to kill by the time we got to the airport.
Well, wow, what a great vacation, John. That just sounds amazing, and it's definitely on our bucket list to get up there and do this with Disney with the kids as well. And I really want to thank you for coming on once again. Is there anything else you wanted to add as far as that we haven't covered that we might have missed, or anything else that stood out?
Just that we had a great time, a really great time. And I know I've made a few comments as we've gone through on where Disney might make a few little improvements, but overall Disney did a great job. And the Baltic cruise, just like the one we took to Norway, that will live long in our memories and for all the right reasons.
So with that being said, is there another one in your future?
There absolutely is. So before we went on this cruise, we'd already booked to go to the Mediterranean in May 2018. And one of the first things we did this time was to visit the vacation planning desk on the Disney Magic.
Good point.
And we cancelled our booking and we rebooked while we were on the ship, taking advantage of the 10% discount that they offer for booking while you're on board. Also taking advantage of the reduced deposit amount that you have to pay and the free $200 of onboard credit that you get. And by doing that, we saved well over $1,000. So that's well worth doing. So you won't be surprised to hear that Caroline and I did go and buy ourselves a nice drink in the bar after we'd sorted that out.
Just celebrate a good financial decision, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, cool. We look forward to talking to you about the Mediterranean and hearing about what your guys' thoughts are on that. I do have one other final question, and this is kind of a little bit off the wall, but now you've been in the Disney Magic twice, and to be honest, our family's kind of been the same way, where we've been on the Wonder and the Magic. Do you have any desire to go on the bigger ships? Have you ever thought about it?
It's not. I suppose the size of the ship isn't something that bothers me one way or the other.
Uh-huh.
So it's really about, for us, it would be about the destination rather than the actual ship. So I'd love to go to Castaway Cay one day, or even, we heard that Disney are building this new island in the Caribbean for when the two new ships come on stream.
Right.
One or both of those are going to go to a new island, not Castaway Cay. I guess you've heard that as well.
Yeah, just because it won't be able to hold.
Yeah, exactly. It's a capacity thing, isn't it?
Right.
So I'd love to do that one day, but equally I'd love to go to Alaska, which is the Wonder mostly today, isn't it?
Yes.
So I'm not particularly bothered about the size of ship. For us, it's much more interesting about where it goes. Christy talked in one of the podcasts you did with her about for some people the ship is the destination, and for some people where you go is the destination. For us, it's about where you go. It's not about the ship per se.
And I think that's where our families are kind of similar, because that's kind of the way we are too. It's more about the destinations, what you're going to be able to see, as opposed to necessarily the ship itself. So.
Yeah, it'd be nice to experience something new. I mean, the Disney Magic for us, it never feels busy, other than probably the final afternoon on the final sea day. There's a lot of people getting involved in things. So I think there was a trivia quiz going on, and there were a lot of people trying to take part in that trivia quiz. So, we didn't do that because there were just so many people. But other than that, the ship never feels that busy. So I'd be interested to go on one of the bigger ones, one of the 4,500, 5,000 ones, just to see how that feels compared to a 2,500 ship. But I'm not hung up on that. Maybe we'll get to do that one day.
Right. Yeah, the Magic of the Wonder just feel comfortable to us, I guess. So, anyways, just kind of an out there question. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much, John, for coming on. I know with the time zone difference and stuff like that, it kind of makes it tough sometimes. But I really appreciate you coming on, and I hope that you'll come on prior to your Mediterranean cruise, if not sooner, and we can talk some more about your upcoming cruise and just Disney Cruise Line, and maybe just Disney in general. That
would be great. If people aren't completely bored of listening to me go on about stuff, I'd love to.
No. I've definitely got some awesome feedback on all the shows that we've done together, and your interesting takes on some of the just great opportunities of places that you've got to see. So once again, best to you and your family, and thanks for coming on, and I look forward to talking to you soon, John.
Thanks, Steve. Bye.
Bye. Well, that is going to be a wrap for this episode, and what an amazing trip that John and his family got to spend going through the Baltic this past May, and listening to him talk about cruising through the islands as they went into and out of Stockholm. It just sounds like a magical place, and that, I guess, is one of the many reasons why I guess we and our family gravitate towards Disney Cruise Line and just travel in general, because there are just so many magical places like that out there in the world to get out and see. So once again, I want to really thank John and his family for sharing their experiences with me and for allowing me to pass it on to you, the listeners out there. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can always reach me on Twitter at DCL Podcast, or you can also look us up on Facebook at the DCL Podcast as well. And I'll put in the show notes Christy's contacts as well. You can reach her at Pack Your Pixie Dust, both on Twitter and also on Facebook. So I really hope once again that you enjoyed this show on the Baltic. And if you're heading out on a cruise or travel here in the near future, I want to wish you fair winds and safe travels on your next adventure. Thanks everyone for coming back and listening, and we'll see you next time on the DCL podcast.